Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another day of learning. My name is Sarah, and this is Miss Casey. She'll be your teacher today. Today, you'll be retelling a story using narrative writing. So you'll need something to write with, something to write on, and if you have your planning sheet from your lesson with Mr. Zach, you can get that too. Y'all have a great time.
Thank you. Hey, boys and girls. Today, we're going to create a draft of narrative writing retelling our fiction text that you read with Mr. Zach. We're also going to build simple and compound sentences in that writing. But before we get started, let's review our story. King Log and King Crane. Once, the frog said, "We wish we had a king. We need a king. We must have a king." The frogs spoke to the gods. They said, "We ask you, the gods, to send us a king." Here's a picture of the frogs asking the gods to send them a king. "The frogs are fools," said the gods. "As a joke, let us send them a big log to be their king." The gods got a big log and let it drop. The log fell in the pond and made a big splash. The frogs were scared of the log. They said, "King Log is strong. We must hide from him in the grass." Here are the frogs looking at that log, and you can see on their faces they're very scared, and the gods are watching from above. As time went by, the frogs came to see that King Log was tame. He did not bite. He did not run. He just sat there. "King Log is not a strong king," said one frog. "I wish we had a strong king." "I do too. We must have a strong king." The frogs spoke to the gods. They said, "We ask you, the gods, to send us a strong king, and send him soon." This time the gods sent a crane to be king of Frogland. King Crane was not like King Log. He did not just sit there. He ran fast on his long legs, and he ate lots of the frogs. Here's King Crane chasing the frogs and eating them. The frogs were sad. "King Crane is a bad king," they said. "We miss King Log. He was a fine king. We made a bad trade." The frogs spoke to the gods. They said, "We ask you, the gods, to send us back King Log." The gods were mad. "Fools," they said. "You said you must have a strong king. We sent you one. He is yours to keep." So, boys and girls, now that we've reviewed our story, we're going to write our writing draft. So, let's look back at our planning sheet that you did with Mr. Zach and our writing process. So the first piece is plan, which you've already done with Mr. Zach. Today, we're going to create a draft. But let's review our planning sheet first, because I think we can add some details to that. Now remember, a narrative story is retelling a story using details of what happened at the beginning, the middle, and the end. The name of the tale we wrote about is King Log and King Crane. Who was in the story? Let's remember. Can you remember who was in the story? That's right. Frogs, gods, and a crane. Where did the story take place? In a pond with grass. So then we have once there were, next in the tale, and at the end of the tale, our beginning, middle, and end. And you all said, once there were frogs that wanted a king. But let's add something to that. Can you think of a detail we can add to that to make it a little more informative? So what did the gods send them when they asked for a king? That's right. They sent them a log king. The gods sent a log king. So, once there were frogs that wanted a king, and the gods sent a log king. But when they sent that log king, what happened? How did they feel about that? That's right, they were scared. They were scared of that log. Why do you think they were scared of that log? Let's think. Yep, maybe because it was so big. So next, in the tale, the frogs asked for a strong king. But then, at the end of the tale, we said the gods sent a crane to be king. So they sent a crane, but what happened when they sent that crane? That's right, he ate the frogs. He ate the frogs. So, using our planning sheet and our details we added, now we're going to create a draft. Remember, the first thing that we need to do is write the title. Our title is King Log and King Crane. And we're going to underline our title. So that's the first part we need to include, King Log and King Crane. Now, when we start out, we've talked about it before, we need to indent. Who remembers what indent means? Think real hard. Right, indent means you can use a finger space, or in my case, I'm going to use 3 fingers because my paper is so big. We'll use 3 fingers and then we'll start. Now, before we start our details, we have to talk about who and what of the story. So who, the frogs, gods, or crane, and where, pond with grass. So let's say once there were frogs Let's sound out frogs. Frogs. F-R-O-G-S. So once there were frogs, and what happened? Where were they? They lived in a pond with grass. In is a sight word. We know I-N. N-A. Let's sound out pond. How many syllables does pond have? Pond. Right, 1. Let's sound it out. Pond. P-O-N-D. Lived in a pond with grass. So, once there were frogs that lived in a pond with grass. Now that we have once there were frogs, now we have once there were frogs that wanted a king. So how could we change that word to make it a little bit different than repeating the same thing? Okay, we could just say there were frogs or the frogs. So the frogs, we've already sounded that word out. Frogs. What did they want? They wanted a king. Great job. The frogs wanted a king. What goes at the end of that sentence? A period. You're right. They wanted a king. So let's think. They asked for a king, and then what happened? who did the gods send? The gods sent a log king. The gods sent, let's sound out log. L-O-G, log. A log king. So when they sent the log, what did the frogs think? That's right, they were scared. They is a sight word that we have to remember how to spell. They were scared. Period. So let's review what we have so far. Once there were frogs that lived in a pond with grass. The frogs wanted a king. The gods sent a log king. They were scared. So we have our first part. Now, next in the tale, and we can use the word next or next in the tale. We have our linking words here and our tricky words to help us remember. Our linking words are words that help us link our sentences together in the story. So do you want to say next in the tale or just next? I think next in the tale too. So next in the tale, what happened? The frogs asked for what? That's right. A strong king. The frogs, remember we've already sounded that out. Frogs. Frogs. The frogs asked for a strong. Now that's a hard one. Let's think about it. We know we have S at the beginning. Strong. 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 S-T-R-O-N-G. They asked for a strong king. So, next in the tale, the frogs asked for a strong king. Now, what happened at the end? That's right. They sent them another king. What kind of king did they send them? They did. They sent them a crane. So, we could say, like on our planning sheet, at the end of the tale, or we could use a different linking verb. So, what do you think? Last. I think we should just say last too. So last, last, the gods sent what? What did they send? That's right, they sent a crane to be king. A crane. Crane is a tricky word because it has a bossy E at the end. Crane. C-R-A-N-E. Crane with that bossy E at the end. Last, the gods sent a crane to be king. So what happened then? They sent the crane, but what did the crane do? That's right, he ate the frogs. That's so sad. So he ate the frogs. Who is he? The crane, right. So let's say that. Here's our tricky word again with that bossy E. Crane ate the frogs. So let's review. Once there were frogs that lived in a pond with grass. The frogs wanted a king. The gods sent a log king. They were scared. Next in the tale, the frogs asked for a strong king. Last, the gods sent a crane to be king. The crane ate the frogs. Oh my goodness. So in a tale like this, we have a moral or a lesson at the end of the story. So I think we should add that to the end of our writing. What is our lesson that we learned in this story? I want you to think hard. Remember, at the beginning, the frogs wanted a king, but they weren't happy with the one they got, so they asked for another one. And when they got the next one, that king started eating them. So what would our lesson be? Oh, I think I heard someone give a great answer. They said we should be happy with what we have. I agree. Happy is a great word to use for that, but I think there's a bigger word we can use to use a $10 word for our writing. I heard someone say it. We should appreciate what we have. So, we should. I'm going to help you with appreciate because that's a tricky word. That's a really big one. Appreciate. Appreciate doesn't necessarily follow all of our rules. That's a hard one to spell. Appreciate what we have. That means we should be happy with what we already have and not worried about getting something different, right? So let's reread our writing, and I want you to look for a couple things. I want you to look to make sure we have our capital letters at the beginning of our sentences and our punctuation at the end. So King Log and King Crane. Once there were frogs that lived in a pond with grass. The frogs wanted a king. The gods sent a log king. They were scared. Next in the tale, the frogs asked for a strong king. Last, the gods sent a crane to be king. The crane ate the frogs. We should appreciate what we have. Great job, boys and girls. So, before we go, I'm going to show you a final copy of a writing that we did with a different group, just so you can see a different way to write it. And it's pretty much the same, but let's look at this one. King Log and King Crane. In the tale, King Log and King Crane, some frogs lived in a pond with grass. Once the frogs wanted a king. The gods sent a log king. The frogs were scared of the log. Next in the tale, the frogs asked for a strong king. Last, the gods sent a crane to be king, and the crane ate the frogs. This tale tells us we should appreciate what we have. So that's just a little bit different way to write it, but it still follows all the things we learned about. Thank you for working so hard today. We'll see you again another day.
Thank you so much, Miss Casey, and thank you, boys and girls. I really enjoyed that story, and I guess we do have to be careful what we wish for so a crane doesn't come eat us. I'm so proud of the work you did, and I know that you're proud of yourselves. And if you did your writing, you can share that with your family at home. All rights and credits for today's lesson belong to Core Knowledge Language Arts. We'd like to thank them for publicly sharing these valuable resources. The views and opinions expressed in this lesson are those of Core Knowledge authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Mississippi Department of Education. Thanks for joining, boys and girls. See you next time.